Chapter 1. The Inheritance. I hadn't been back to that part of the country in over a decade. The last time I saw Grandpa's cabin, I was maybe 12 years old, sitting on the rickety front porch in a rusted lawn chair, eating a peanut butter sandwich while my grandfather smoked his pipe and told me stories I only half listened to. Something about bears and forest spirits and things older than this land. I never knew whether he was joking or not. He had a voice made for stories. Calm, raspy, and always a little too steady. When he passed away last year, it hit me harder than I expected. We hadn't been close in recent years. Life, as it tends to do, got in the way. I moved to the city. He stayed in the woods. We exchanged Christmas cards, but not much else. So when the lawyer called to say Grandpa left me the cabin in his will, I didn't know what to feel. Nostalgia, maybe. Confusion. I certainly wasn't expecting it. My dad, his only son, was furious. He didn't say it outright, but I could hear it in his voice. "It doesn't make sense," he said. "That place is a ruin. Why would he give it to you?" Maybe because I actually listened to his stories. Maybe because I was the only one who ever seemed to care. I made the trip on a cold Wednesday morning in October, after taking a few days off work. The kind of weather where the trees look skeletal and the air smells like something's burning in the distance. I drove 6 hours north, past towns I hadn't seen since childhood, down winding roads barely wider than a driveway. And there it was. Just like I remembered it, though more faded, more fragile. The roof sagged in one corner, and the paint on the shutters had peeled so badly you could barely tell they'd once been green. Nature had reclaimed much of the yard. Vines climbing the porch railing, weeds bursting through the cracks in the steps. But it was still standing. Still. Watching. Unlocking the door felt like opening a sealed memory. The scent hit me first. Dust, cedar, something faintly metallic. The living room looked untouched, like time had simply paused here. Grandpa's recliner still sat in the corner, threadbare and leaning to one side. The old stone fireplace was filled with cold ash. A faded photograph of my grandmother, who died when I was a baby, still hung on the wall. There was something peaceful about it all. And yet, a tension hung in the air, like a breath held too long. The next few hours were a mix of cleaning and quiet wandering. I opened cupboards, flipped through old books, found little notes Grandpa had scribbled in the margins. Check chimney next winter, rats behind stove? Don't trust the well water after frost. Felt like walking through his mind. But then I found the door. It was behind the pantry shelf in the kitchen, a tall, narrow built and I remembered from childhood. It always held canned peaches, expired crackers, and jars of jam that no one ever opened. But as I was clearing out the back, I noticed the shelf was unusually deep. Too deep. And the wall behind it? It sounded hollow. I knocked again, and the thud echoed back at me like a drum. I should have left it alone. I should have assumed it was just bad construction or my imagination getting ahead of me. But something about it nagged at me. I moved the shelf, carefully, and there it was. A door. Not a new one. Old, like the rest of the house. But sealed around the edges with some kind of caulking or glue. No handle. No keyhole. Just a smooth wooden surface, painted over to match the wall. Why would anyone seal a door from the outside? That night, I barely slept. Not because of the door exactly, but because of the silence. I'd forgotten how loud silence could be in the woods. How the groaning of trees in the wind could sound like footsteps. How raccoons on the roof could imitate voices if your mind was tired enough. Around 2 a.m., I sat up in bed and turned on my phone's flashlight. I was thinking about the door. And about what my grandfather used to say when I'd ask him why that part of the house always felt colder. Some rooms, he once told me, aren't meant to be opened again. Chapter 2. The Tapes. The next morning, I went back to the hidden door. In daylight, it looked less menacing. Still odd, but the harshness of the morning sun made it seem like something practical. Maybe an old pantry or forgotten broom closet. Still, I couldn't shake how deliberately it had been sealed. As if someone had wanted to erase it from the house entirely. I examined the edges again. The sealant had hardened into a brittle crust. When I scraped it with a flathead screwdriver I found in Grandpa's old toolbox, it chipped like dried wax. Underneath was bare wood, rough, splintered, and somehow warmer than it should have been. The door was warmer than the rest of the house. That didn't make sense. There were no vents, no insulation back there, and the morning temperature outside was still hovering in the low 40s. I didn't open it. Not yet. Something held me back. Instead, I turned to the rest of the cabin. I figured I could get my mind off the door by organizing the old attic. My grandfather never threw anything away, and I remembered that attic being stacked floor to ceiling with dusty boxes, rusted tools, even an ancient telescope I once broke and then carefully tried to fix before he noticed. It took me half an hour to even reach the attic hatch. It was hidden behind a row of old coats and had swollen slightly in the frame. But once I got it open and climbed the creaking ladder, I stepped into a world of forgotten decades. Stacks of newspapers lined one wall, carefully bundled, all from the early 60s to late 80s. A row of paint cans had long since rusted shut. Several plastic bins were labeled in neat handwriting, Zmaz lights, July 4th flags, old clothes. But there was one that stood out. It sat beneath a moth-eaten tarp and was labeled simply, "Dubbed copies, do not throw away." Inside were cassette tapes. Dozens of them. Some were commercial, old westerns, nature documentaries, outdated religious sermons. But many were unmarked. Or worse, labeled with vague, ominous things like, Day 4, Basement, or Voices Again, Late. A few were labeled in handwriting I didn't recognize. Shaky, almost frantic script scrawled in Sharpie. I brought 5 of them down to the living room, found Grandpa's old tape player, and held my breath as I pressed play on the first one. For a few seconds. Static. Then, his voice. Clear, unmistakable, and oddly intimate. Grandpa had recorded himself. Entry 1, he said. November 2nd, 1983. Storm just passed. I'm making this so I don't forget again. There was a long pause. I heard the creak of a chair. The sound of fingers tapping wood. Room's cold again tonight. Colder than usual. I measured. 6 degrees lower than outside. No explanation. I thought maybe it was the air vent. But I checked. Nothing. Sealed shut. Another pause. Heard it again. Whispering. Same time as yesterday. 1:47 a.m. I stopped the tape. My fingers had gone cold. I played the second. November 5th, Grandpa's voice said. I stayed up last night. Sat outside the door with a shotgun and a tape recorder. Caught something. Playing it back now. The audio shifted. Fuzzy silence. Then a sharp click. Then, something else. A sound that was barely audible, like wind through tall grass. But there was something in it. A pattern. A breath. And then, Daniel. My name. Clear as day. I dropped the recorder. The sound stopped. I sat there for nearly an hour, staring at the thing like it might move. Like maybe the voice wasn't on the tape at all, but in the room with me. Eventually, I picked it up again, rewound it, played the clip back. No voice. No sound. Just static. That night, I didn't sleep. I barely moved. I sat on the couch with the shotgun Grandpa had kept in the closet. Yes, it was still there. And stared at that door behind the pantry. I kept expecting it to creak open on its own. Or worse, knock. But it didn't. Nothing happened. Until 1:47 a.m. And that's when I heard it. The slow, deliberate sound of someone walking across the floor. From inside the sealed room. Chapter 3. What was left inside? The footsteps stopped just as suddenly as they began. 3 soft thuds. Then silence. My skin prickled with the memory of that voice. My name, whispered through static, and I sat there frozen, the barrel of the shotgun resting on my knees, every muscle locked in place. I was afraid to blink, let alone move. Because if I did, I was sure I'd hear it again. Or worse, see something on the other side of that sealed wood. But nothing else came. Just silence. I stayed up until dawn. The next day, with the light outside finally giving me some courage, I made a decision. I wasn't going to live in fear of a door. I wasn't going to tiptoe around the house like a kid afraid of the basement. This cabin was mine now. My grandfather was gone. And whatever he'd locked away, he hadn't done it out of malice. Maybe it was dementia. Maybe he'd gone a little crazy in his later years and left behind a pile of spooky recordings and creaky floorboards. Maybe this was all in my head. I told myself that again and again as I stood in front of the hidden door with a crowbar. It didn't take long to force it open. The wood splintered along the edge where the old nails and sealant had been worked deep into the frame. Behind it was a second door, thicker, metal, and bolted shut from the outside with two heavy latches. Like a walk-in freezer door. Why would anyone build something like that in a cabin? There was no keyhole. No digital lock. Just two cold metal bolts that screamed to be left alone. I unlatched both slowly, then hesitated before pulling. And then I opened it. The smell hit first. Not rot, not mold, but something sterile, bleached, like the back room of a hospital. The air felt wrong, too still, too heavy, as if it hadn't moved in years. The room inside was small, maybe 10 by 10 feet. The walls were concrete, lined with fading insulation foam. There were no windows. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, but it didn't flicker when I turned it on. At first glance, the room looked empty. But then I saw the table. It was shoved against the far wall, metal and rusted. On top of it sat a stack of old notebooks, a black rotary phone with a cord cut, and a single glass jar with something inside. I walked to it. Inside the jar was a tooth. Human. I stepped back. My breath caught in my throat. On the table beneath the jar was a Polaroid photo, warped with time. I picked it up carefully. It was a picture of me. Not recent me as a child. I couldn't have been older than 7. I was standing at the edge of the lake just behind the cabin, wearing a red life vest and holding a fishing rod. I don't remember anyone taking that photo. But there I was. Behind me in the picture, you could barely make out the silhouette of someone else. Someone tall. Watching. I flipped the photo over. In shaky, all caps writing, it said, "Don't let him out." My heart pounded. I looked around the room again, this time with the realization that maybe I hadn't opened a storage room, but a prison. The floor had marks. Deep scratches near the far corner, like someone had dragged something heavy, or had tried to claw their way out. One of the notebooks caught my attention. It was thicker than the rest, its leather binding cracked with age. Inside were dozens of entries in Grandpa's handwriting. Most were short, single lines. Others were full paragraphs of rambling paranoia. He doesn't age. He knows when I'm awake. He looks like me, but he's not me. The door must stay closed. The cabin is the lock. I am the key. I slammed the book shut. That was when I noticed the last object. In the corner, barely visible in the dim light, was a small wooden box with a clasp. Inside were 6 cassette tapes, labeled just like the ones upstairs, but these were numbered 1 through 6. I took the first one, slid it into the old player I had carried in with me, and pressed play. "If you're hearing this," Grandpa's voice said, "then I'm probably gone. And God help you, you opened the door." Silence. "There's still time. Don't look for him. Don't speak to him. Whatever he says, he lies." The tape cut out. A shiver ran through me so violently I nearly dropped the player. I turned around to leave, and saw that the door was closed. I hadn't touched it, but it was shut, and something was standing in front of it. Oh, it looked like a man, but not quite. Its face was mine. Chapter 4. The Man in the Room. I didn't move. Neither did he. For several seconds, or maybe it was a full minute, we stood there in silence, the two of us in that dim concrete room. My heart thudded so loud in my ears I couldn't hear anything else. The figure, the man with my face, tilted his head slowly as though fascinated. The light from the ceiling bulb flickered once, casting shadows across his features. But it wasn't just that he looked like me. He looked almost like me. Like someone had copied my face from memory and gotten it just slightly wrong. His eyes were too wide. The smile didn't reach them. His mouth was drawn back in a way that felt stretched. His clothes hung loose on his frame, an old flannel and jeans that looked too large. I realized then they were my grandfather's. "I've been waiting," he said softly, voice dry like paper sliding across a table. "You look just like he did when he first brought me here." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat was dry. What are you? I finally managed. The man's head twitched, just once, and the smile grew wider. Family. I stepped back, my foot catching on the leg of the table. I stumbled, eyes darting toward the door. It was shut, yes, but not locked. I could reach it. I just had to move. Don't you want to know, he asked. Why he kept me here? Why you found the tapes? Why he lied to you? I didn't answer. I reached out, grabbed the cassette player from the table, and backed toward the door. The thing that looked like me didn't follow. It just stood there, arms slack at its sides. Run if you want, it said, voice sharper now. You opened the door. That means you took the key. You brought me back. I bolted. I slammed the door behind me and threw both metal latches into place. Then I collapsed against the wall, shaking, trying not to throw up. That thing. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. But it had my voice. I didn't sleep that night. I listened to the second tape. He came in 1967, Grandpa's voice said, quieter now. Just after the lake froze early. I thought he was lost. Confused. He looked like me. Said he was from another place. That he'd been searching for years. At first I helped him. Let him stay. Gave him food. We talked. But the more he said, the more I realized, he wasn't a man at all. He doesn't eat. He doesn't bleed. He knows everything I think before I think it. He wants to be me. The tape hissed at the end. I stared at it for a long time before pulling the next one from the box. Tape 3. I trapped him. Took months to figure out how. He doesn't like mirrors. Doesn't cast a reflection. The room, this room, has layers. Insulation, salt, steel, ash. Things that hold him still. But I'm not eternal. I'm dying. Someone else will come. I thought it'd be your father. But he never came back. So now it's you. If you're listening, it means the blood runs strong. You have the gift too. You hear the voices. The dreams. The door was always meant for you. That night I had the first dream. It started at the lake. I was a boy again, wearing a red life vest, standing with my fishing rod in the exact spot from the Polaroid. Behind me, someone watched. I turned. He smiled with my face. And whispered, "Let me out." I woke up screaming. The following week, I didn't leave the cabin. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. What would I even say? That something pretending to be me was locked in a secret room built by my dead grandfather? That I heard it in my dreams? But things started to change. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. My reflection in the bathroom mirror would blink. Just a second too late. I'd wake up with bruises on my wrists, as if someone had grabbed me during the night. The woods outside felt heavier. Closer. And the door. Every morning, one of the bolts was undone. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I didn't latch it fully. But then one night, I stayed up in the hallway, just outside the hidden room. I sat there, shotgun across my lap, and I watched the door. At 3:09 a.m., I heard the first bolt slide open from the inside. I stood, heart racing, and the second bolt began to creak. I yelled, "Stop!" And it did. Silence. Then, "You're just like him," the voice murmured through the cracks in the door. "Afraid. But you won't be forever." I didn't respond. I didn't move. I waited until sunrise. I knew I couldn't stay. But I also knew I couldn't leave him. In that room forever. Something had changed. Had waited, yes. For 60 years, maybe. But now it was learning. It was dreaming with me. Speaking in my sleep. I had to make a choice. Burn the cabin down. Or speak to him. And that's when I listened to the final tape. Tape 6. "He's not just mine," Grandpa whispered. "He's part of us. Born from what we never faced. A copy of a lie told long ago. Every family has its shadow. He is ours. He doesn't want freedom. He wants a name." And just like that, I knew what I had to do. Chapter 5. The Name Beneath the Floorboards. I didn't leave the house for the next 3 days. I barely ate. I didn't shower. My phone buzzed every few hours with texts from friends in town. Still up there. Everything okay? Come down for drinks? But I didn't answer. The silence in the cabin became its own kind of noise. A pressure that built in my ears and behind my eyes. My dreams grew deeper, longer, more vivid. Each night, he came closer in the dream. Not running. Just walking. Through the trees. Across the lake. Toward the porch. And I always woke up the moment he stepped onto the wood. Right before he reached the door. But the worst part wasn't the dreams. It was what I saw in the waking world. The man in the mirror had started to move differently. Not all at once. It was subtle at first. Delayed blinks. Mismatched hand gestures. But then one morning, God, I can still feel it. I leaned over the sink to splash cold water on my face, and when I looked up, he was smiling. And I wasn't. I knew there was something more. I went back to the hidden room, not inside, but just outside. I sat on the floor and examined every inch of the hallway. The walls. The floorboards. My grandfather was careful. Obsessive. He wouldn't have left those tapes in the open box if he didn't mean for me to hear them. And he wouldn't have left me without a final answer. It was on the third night that I found it. The far wall of the hallway, opposite the sealed door, had a small nail that stuck out awkwardly near the baseboard. I tugged at it. It wiggled. Not a nail. A pin. I pressed inward and heard a faint click. The panel beside it popped open just slightly, revealing a narrow, dark space no wider than a shoebox. Inside, a wooden box, velvet-lined, locked with a rusted clasp. I didn't need a key. I used a screwdriver from the shed. Inside the box were a photograph I had never seen before, a folded envelope, stained and brittle, a single brass nameplate with the words Elias Whitlock engraved on it. That name sent a shiver up my back. I didn't know why, but it was familiar, almost like I had heard it in a dream. The photograph showed two boys standing in front of a stone well in the woods. One of them was clearly my grandfather, his eyes unmistakable. The other looked like me, too much like me. Same chin, same uneven eyebrows, same scar above the left temple. I didn't remember ever injuring myself there, but the scar was there. I'd always assumed I was born with it. But the boy in the photo had it too. The envelope held a single page, written in my grandfather's trembling hand. Elias wasn't born. He came from the mirror. First time I saw him, I was 12. He said he was me, from a better world. A cleaner world. One without pain. But he lied. He took. He wanted what I had. My voice. My hands. My skin. I tried to forget. But he followed. He follows the blood. If you see him, don't let him name himself. Once he has a name, he becomes real. My fingers shook. I dropped the letter. I had already given him the name. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the reflection in the sliding glass door. My own shadow, barely visible against the black night outside. Until he appeared. He stepped into the frame like someone entering stage left. Same flannel. Same jeans. Same eyes. He didn't smile this time. He just whispered, "You gave it to me." I turned around. The yard was empty. But the glass still held his face. Not mine. His. Elias. I couldn't stay there anymore. Whatever was locked in that room, whatever had whispered through the walls and into my dreams, it wasn't just some spirit or trick. It was real. It had shape. History. A name now. And my blood. I packed my things that night. Tapes. Photos. The box. I left everything else behind. But when I got into my truck and looked into the rearview mirror, he was sitting in the back seat. No sound. Just a smile. And then he faded. Like fog on glass. I didn't go back to the city. I didn't go to the police. I drove to the coast, checked into the first motel I found, and started researching the name, Elias Whitlock. That's when things got worse. There were records. Census documents from the 1800s. A man named Elias Whitlock. Lived in Vermont. Disappeared during a cabin fire. Wife and son died. Rumors of devil doubling, of townspeople seeing him walk the woods weeks after the fire. And photos. Dozens of old photographs in public archives. Different towns. Different decades. Same face. Always the same face. Mine.